Hey, how's it going, everyone? Just want to do a really quick video on an interaction with another person on my comment board. And I spelled board like that on purpose. But this is in response to a video where I was asking about requesting a free body diagram from the ball earth community with the two items that I put on the side of a ball. And, I want understanding on, how to draw them, what orientation, what strength, what governs their formulas for both. And, then I can start digging down into asking questions about how they don't interfere and are they actually exerting real pressure on another item, or and if they're not, how are they able to be independent mathematically? And so really what I know and what I suspect now is that each atom has to have its own gravity vector assigned to it. And it's governed at a point level, I guess, by that formula F equals G m1 m2 over r squared, which essentially means that each atom in the entire universe has a gravity vector assigned to it with that strength and its orientation pulling it towards the center of the earth. And so that all those infinite number of vectors, though, however, cannot interfere, because, like I said, it's done on a point-wise level, and if they were to interfere, we would have situations that are non-physical, where those forces, we would have to understand what influence they're exerting on others, on other atoms or other items near it. And that's a major problem, because once you put a heavy object near a lighter one would think that if these forces are actually real, that the field that governs their ability to stay there would add or do interact in some way mathematically, and represent sort of a cumulative effect. But that we know is not the case. So they would have to basically stick with the fact that each atom is given a vector, and it's governed by that formula, and it's acting independently of all the other ones, which mathematically is orthogonal. And so that's a problem, because basically you cannot create a field from that. You would have to then have belief that each atom somehow is given this vector. It's almost like a key, like a token, giving it it's sort of how would I describe this? It's like its own pass, in space, its own way to live in our three-dimensional space, but not interfere or constructively or destructively impact other vectors. And so this obviously is complete voodoo. But, I just want to quickly get into these comments. So the guy's like, wow, I don't think I ever came across anyone thinking forces applied to independent objects should add together. I do think that they should, because this would be a field. This would not be a field then. This would be a point-wise field with an infinite number of vectors. And then the question then I would have is, what governs that behavior? How does one assign those points a vector, and where is the intelligence behind that? What is allowing that to happen? And then basically mathematically, like I said, you would have to give each one of these atoms a new vector, and it's that intelligence that I would like to understand and characterize mathematically, which obviously cannot be done, because it would literally require some item in the center of the earth that's literally handing out these orthogonal vectors. So then they go on, very creative. I love it. So there's a hint of sarcasm there. And then at some point in the third paragraph, they're like, also a small note, when talking about geometric vectors, the word orthogonal means perpendicular or having 90-degree angle between them. You don't call non-interfering spatial vectors orthogonal in this context. Okay, well, just to quickly debunk that, because we have a math wizard here who's also sarcastic. So we have a sarcastic Goodwill Hunting. But the problem that this person, they don't understand the dot product. So the dot product or inner product or scalar product, all the same thing, applies in n-dimensional space. It doesn't just apply to two-dimensional, three-dimensional vectors, which, yes, would have what we would understand as a 90-degree angle between them, label them perpendicular, and so on. Orthogonality is a general term. You can apply it to n-dimensional vectors, and to take the dot product between two n-dimensional vectors, you just element by element take x1 of the first vector, multiply it by y1 of the second vector, and then just multiply each one pointwise and then add them together. And whatever that number ends up being, it's going to be a number, one number. let's say it's 5, that is what's known as the inner product. It's kind of a measure from an intuitive perspective of how sort of correlated the two vectors are in terms of their orientation in n-dimensional space. And so when you have two vectors that are orthogonal, their scalar product, because again, this product produces just a scalar number, or inner product or dot product will produce the number 0. And then that shows that in this sort of n-dimensional space, which in 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional space would be represented by 90 degrees or perpendicular, you can deem them to be orthogonal. It has more general implications than just simply drawing a 90-degree angle between two vectors. Draw a 90-degree angle between two 5-dimensional vectors. Ask a baller that. These people are coming with a cloak of righteousness, of brilliance, of all this kind of stuff. Unfortunately, we have to humble them because the implications for this are not cosmetic. We're dealing with a very, very important topic here that, in my opinion, again, is the foundation for the mark of the beast, which has very real day-to-day implications. This is not just a math contest or who's smarter context. If it were just that, I would honestly not be involved in this debate because, a person's intelligence or where they are on the pecking order is not governed by them. I didn't interact with the universe or God or whatever you believe, to make myself and my abilities or lack of abilities. So that's a pointless pursuit to figure out where you are in the hierarchy. Who cares? So I had to, come back with this, and then the guy, this is incredible. They're allowed to be sarcastic and basically ridicule my my intelligence. I have one person making a fake LinkedIn account confirming that it's actually me on LinkedIn. I have another person saying that they're going to call University of Windsor, even though I went to the University of Western Ontario, and confirm that I actually went to the school. I had another person who went on Rice's thesis repository for their library, their digital library, and checked if I had, my thesis was posted there. So I did a non-thesis master's. I actually was pursuing a PhD in electrical engineering, but I left and did a non-thesis master's, just because the whole research, the process and all that is for a select few, and that was not me. So I'm, very upfront with that. I did, obviously take all those courses, and do a research project and all that kind of stuff. But, these people are, doing their due diligence, which is fine. I have absolutely no issues with that. That's good. But, when they come and make statements like this, we trap them, in making statements that prove we're not dealing with scholars here, and it's okay to push back. Again, especially because this topic is extremely important. And so they're like, this guy's like, you sounded like a polite and reasonable guy. Yeah, I am, in real life, if people need help or whatever, I'm not the type to take, I try as best as I can, especially now, because I feel like there's no point because we're in the end times. But, there's, I don't like to leverage people. Obviously, if I see somebody who needs help, I'll do what I can. But when it comes to people lying and leading other people astray, that needs to be met with sternness. And especially if you're parading around as being a genius and a guru on certain topics like vector spaces, I have to obviously call this out. And again, I have no issues being around very smart people. In many ways, I wish that these people were a lot smarter, and I'd find a few that are very good at explaining things. But we're struggling with that because, and I have a feeling more and more people worldwide are going to start challenging some of the assumptions of this whole ball Earth lie. This whole body of quote unquote knowledge, wisdom, science, rigor that is falling apart, in my opinion, crumbling, right before our eyes, largely due to the efforts of other people. So I'm like, you insult me and I reply back, then you go crying to mommy. I'm like, let's see that free body diagram or steps to make one. Your credentials will easily be inferred from the rigor and clarity of your mathematical representation of Freemason G. And it's true, once they put pen to paper, once they draw a free body diagram with the forces that are apparently acting on these items, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever number of items they are, we're going to start asking, hey, are those forces actually exerting pressure? And if they are, where, on who, and all these kind of things. And then we're going to start realizing these vectors that are governing the pressure on pulling are actually somehow able to be independent of one another. And then that's where the voodoo comes in. We'd have to think that there's a magic vector machine in the middle of the earth that is assigning vectors to atoms, that allow them to exert some kind of influence on that atom alone and none other. So we're dealing with a very shady group, in my opinion, people who are obviously not housing the truth because their behavior is not consistent with people who house truth and house it well. Okay, hope everyone's doing well. Bye.